myself, for those of you that we're yet to meet. My name is Justin Wood, and I'm the Director of Partner Relations at ApplyBoard. I came on board a year ago, and it's been an amazing ride. So I've had a terrific year at ApplyBoard. Before that, I was the Director of International at Coventry University in the UK, which was the UK's third largest recruiter of international students. So I've kind of worked very closely with recruitment partners at ApplyBoard and before that at Coventry. And I guess the starting point from me and the team at ApplyBoard is to extend to you a heartfelt thanks on behalf of our university partners. Having been in the game for nearly a decade, I know how hard you all work in supporting students. And of course, it's that mission to educate the world and to be really student-centered that we're all focused on. So I didn't want to let the opportunity to pass without extending a really heartfelt thank you to you for all the work that you do and the impact that you have in changing students' lives. So a very big thank you to you, and let's get into it. So before I kind of talk about what we're going to cover in today's session, let me just flag three important reminders to you. First of all, rest assured that you're going to receive a copy of the recording of this presentation. That doesn't mean that you can switch off, because we want you to pay attention and be engaged. And by be engaged, what I mean is please use the Q&A question feature on the Zoom platform. If I could direct you to ask your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat, but please do put comments in the chat. I'd really encourage you to do that for your feedback and remarks. But for questions, if I could ask you to put those in the Q&A. Another plea from me, please don't disclose any personal information in the Q&A or talk about any specific individual cases. They're best picked up with your contacts and colleagues at ApplyBoard. I just want to check, can everybody hear me okay? Because I'm seeing a couple of remarks there. Brilliant stuff. So it sounds, all those yeses suggest that the person that was struggling to hear me might have had problems themselves. So that's reassuring. Okay, we're going to cover off quite a bit in today's session, kicking off really with thinking about the policy context in the UK and what changes the government are making, have made and are thinking about. And then we'll look at what some of the data is suggesting in terms of demand into the UK and a bit more about the UK as a destination before we talk maybe about the specific role that ApplyBoard has to play in success, and then we'll hand over to you to test the pulse on what you think lies ahead for us in the future. And then we'll wrap up with any questions that we've not been able to cover off during the session. I should say that two of my colleagues from the UK Partner Relations team are on hand and will try and respond to as many of your questions as they come in during the webinar. And they are Yohani and Flavia. Okay, let's get into the policy context. So look, for those of you who have been doing this for a while, you don't need me to remind you that in 2019, after a bit of a difficult period for international student recruitment, the UK government came back with a really welcoming open door policy and a big ambition to grow the number of international students that came into the UK. At the heart of that goal in that international education strategy was the aim to enroll 600,000 students into the UK. So the government launched that strategy in 2019, and the plan was to hit that 600,000 by 2030. In fact, it was done a decade early. So even by 2021, the UK had achieved that 10-year goal. So a remarkable achievement and testament to everyone on the call. I think you've been really critical to the UK hitting that big number. So tap yourself on the back, big cheer, big congratulations. The universities that we work so very closely with have really benefited from that increase in international student numbers. So we hit that target the first year, then we hit it again in 2022, and in fact got close to 680,000 international enrollment. So the UK is booming, and demand to the UK has gone from strength to strength. I would say that is both the best of worlds and the worst of worlds in terms of the pressure it puts on universities to process those applications. But all the universities we work with are still very keen to support international students. They're still very open. And the UK government this year committed again to that target of 600,000. So they're very much keen to support international enrolments into the UK, and committed to supporting the graduate route, the post-study work route that's been key to success in driving that growth, to support those students who want to come, succeed in their degree, and then go on to work afterwards in the UK economy. So that's kind of a broad overview of the success and excitement around UK government policy to support international students. If we go to the next slide, I will just draw your attention to a couple of changes which I know you will be aware of, but they are significant. So the brilliant news, as I said, is that the UK government has recommitted to that target of 600,000 international enrolments, and the graduate route was protected. And there was some media speculation that that wouldn't be the case. But some steps were taken to curtail particularly the huge rise in the number of students who brought with them dependents. This was particularly the case in India and Nigeria, but we saw an 8x increase in the number of students bringing dependents. And that put a bit of pressure on local schools and local communities, and in response the government prevented students at master's level from bringing dependents, and that change takes effect from January 2024. So those students who are intending to start in September, if they're bringing dependents, they're okay, but from January 2024, students at master's level, generally speaking, will no longer be able to bring a dependent. If they're doing a PhD or research degree, then it's still a possibility. But this is a kind of real flag for your future business. Those students will bring a dependent. They won't be able to do at master's level from January 2024. Actually, it doesn't affect the majority of students who come and study in the UK, but it was a significant number, particularly from Nigeria and to a lesser extent India. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. The other significant change was the closing of a loophole, really. It's always been the UK government and the university's view that if a student comes on a student visa, they should continue their study and complete their degree. What we saw was a loophole that enabled students to switch from a student visa to a work visa in the care sector. And this caused a lot of problems with students starting a degree but not completing it. And that has big implications for the student because, of course, they're much better off with their degree. For the university, because if students don't complete their degree, then the university's ability to recruit international students is put at risk. And for the reputation of our recruitment partners and ApplyBoard, if lots of students do not complete their degree. So that's changed. Now students must complete their degree in order to work after graduation. Of course, that's about the visa change into a work visa. students are still actively encouraged to work part-time during their studies. So in the UK, you can work for 20 hours per week during term time, and there are no limits during the holidays if you're studying a degree level qualification. And many international students take advantage of those opportunities. In fact, I was up in Scotland in Edinburgh last week, and they have the huge Edinburgh Fringe Festival just now, which is one of the biggest arts festivals in the world. And international students were really at the forefront of that, doing a lot of the jobs to support that seasonal activity. So the UK economy really benefits from that part-time work of international students. But it's really important when you're advising students, firstly, that if they're coming on a study visa, their number one priority has to be to study and complete their degree. And secondly, that they shouldn't bank on part-time work to pay for their fees, especially because the cost of living in the UK is not cheap. It's a big investment, and they do need to evidence that they've got the funds to do that. Great, we can go on to the next slide. So that's kind of an overview of the policy context. If I was to wrap it up in a nutshell, I'd say the UK is still very much open for business, very keen to support international students. They make a huge contribution to our universities and our communities, and we all benefit from their coming to the UK. Now let's dive into some of the data and see what that's telling us about demand for the UK. So the headline figure when we look at the most recent visa issuance data is that demand continues to boom. The most recently published data that we're looking at here was March, so just a couple of months ago this year. And you can see that the number of issued has pretty much doubled over the last 4 years. So that growth in demand is still really high. I don't need to tell you that August is a peak time. So between July and September, 3/3 of visas are issued to international students for the September fall intake. So now is a peak, which is why we're particularly grateful that you've taken time out to join the webinar, because I know that you're really busy converting students in the final run for September and preparing perhaps for January too. But that's reflected in the visa statistics. So huge demand, and that continues to go from strength to strength. We could go to the next slide, please. So growth has been pretty much across the board, but there are some standout markets, and perhaps they're not the ones that you would think. If you look at Sri Lanka, which has grown by 92% in this period, so a massive, almost doubling of the number of Sri Lankan students coming to the UK. Big demand from Sri Lanka, but also some surprise markets like Myanmar and Australia, also reaching nearly 1,000 students. And then the big story around Nigeria, which continues to boom for the UK, as well as other destinations on the ApplyBoard platform like the US and Canada. Of course, I mentioned the removal of dependents from student visas, and that's likely to have some impact on Nigerian demand. And we're also aware of some of the economic challenges in Nigeria, which are putting pressure on students and their ability to pay because of the changing exchange rate. And lots of our UK universities are working really hard with ApplyBoard to support those Nigerian students to enable them still to come to the UK. I guess from my point of view, having previously worked at a university, the best thing about this mix of countries which are filing for student visas is that it means when you're in the classroom, you're not sat with students of one nationality. And that's a real strength for the UK, that mix of students from all over the world. Let's go to the next slide. I'd already touched on the fact that we're nearly at 680 80,000 international students in the UK, but this chart neatly plots that number, and you can see the growth. This is a bit of a rear view look at the data, because this is HESA data, so it's the actual enrollment numbers. But you can see big growth in the number of students overall, 12% in 1 year, according to the latest statistics. I guess the standout number is for students from the European Union. When the UK left the European Union, we did see a steep decline in those numbers, but that was more than offset by the students coming from outside of the European Union. And just shy of 400,000 students joined the UK last year for the first year of their study. So big growth overall. And that growth was spread across the nations that make up the UK. I guess for me, this is really exciting because ApplyBoard has partners, and we'll see this shortly, across each of the nations. And it's great to see that that growth was universal. Northern Ireland was perhaps the standout growing destination for international students. Growth, as you can see on the chart, was pretty much universal in every part of the United Kingdom. And each bit of the UK has a different offering for international students, coast to coast, a complete varied menu, depending on the profile of the student and what they hope to get out of their studies. You go to the next slide, please. So, massive growth overall, growth from a number of different markets, growth into the UK, into universities across the UK, and the split between undergrad and postgrad is interesting to see. Nearly a quarter of students at university now are from overseas, and of those, half are studying postgraduate courses. Really, really important for the UK economy, actually. But you can see that there's a good split there. When I talk about, we can go to the next slide. Growth in the UK economy, it's interesting to see what people are studying. And it'll come as no surprise that business management is kind of right at the top of the list, and big growth in that subject area, along with engineering and technology, another kind of main staple for international students. Computing, given the job prospects in that sector, is really strong as well. But it's interesting that there's nearly 40% of international students were enrolled on science programs overall, 11% growth on the previous year. So you've kind of got a mixture across the subjects, but they do tend to follow the areas of biggest job opportunities, which we know are a key driver for international students. And of course, this massive growth in postgraduate study at UK universities also enables those universities to use the fees to drive big innovation around research. And some of the stuff coming out on the green economy, on the future of Web3 and AI is really exciting in the UK, and it's an exciting place to be. And you can see that international students are central to that economic development for the country. We can move to the next slide. And, you know, the economy's in an interesting place right now in the UK, because we have had some of the inflation shocks that other countries have experienced because of energy prices, because of the situation in Ukraine. So there are some downward pressure on the economy, and kind of still a bit of a hang-up after COVID. So growth has not been as fast as it had been before the pandemic, but the UK has avoided a recession. And what's remarkable is, whilst the UK economy the growth rate slowed a little bit in recent years, we've avoided a recession, But the most exciting thing is actually the number of vacancies in the economy has remained high. So if you look at the period March to May last year, there were 1.3 billion vacancies in the economy, and there are significant gaps. And for every 100 people in employment, there are kind of over 4 the vacancies in the economy. And for 7 out of the 18 sectors, that's a record high. So there are still skills gaps. There is still a big appetite from employers to fill those skills gaps with graduates, and universities increasingly recognize that international students will play a really important role in filling those gaps. And lots of the universities that we work with have really strong careers departments. So from the minute that a student lands on campus to when they graduate, lots of support is in place to help them secure a job after they graduate. And I'll go back to that point I made around using your 20 hours per week to get some work experience. That really helps students succeed in their career afterwards. We go to the next slide, please. So that's kind of looking back. And then as we look forward, there's also lots of cause for excitement. Universities UK just published a report, I think it might have even been today, where they surveyed senior bosses across the FTSE 350, among others, just to get a sense of where they saw the demand for graduates over the next decade. And the research that they commissioned suggested that we'll need an additional 11 million more graduates by 2035. So the economy is changing, technology, we're on the cusp of a revolution. Many of the jobs that we'll be doing in 10 years, we haven't even thought of yet. If you think about AI prompters or some of the developing elements of the economy, it's really going to require an uplift in our skills. Universities have a really important role to play. International students can really benefit from that. And the employers that I speak to, the universities that I speak to, all recognize that if you're an international student and you've moved halfway around the world on your own, you've created new friendship groups, you've created new professional networks, those are precisely the skills that the future economy needs. Real focus on creativity, critical thinking, and analytical skills, which are really valued, especially as the economy changes during the technological revolution. Next slide, please. So we talked kind of broadly about the UK as a destination. Might be worth just going a level deeper on some of the source markets that students are coming from to the UK. And it remains the case that China is still the largest sending country, according to the official HISA data. That is changing. India is catching up at a rate of knots, actually, and kind of sort of roughly 1 in 2 students coming to the UK either come from India or come from China. But India is looking, according to the visa data, to overtake China in the not so distant future. Of course, big growth from Nigeria and West Africa generally. We saw, as I said, the numbers double there. And I'd already touched on the changes with the European Union and how that led to a big decrease in undergraduate students. I would still say, though, that the UK still attracts lots of students from the European Union, and in fact ApplyBoard is invested in the European Union precisely because we think that there's still many students who are able and want to make that trip. So this again just reinforces that important role that a mix of countries plays. And going back to the policy discussion, the UK government is absolutely focused on diversity. So diversity in which countries students are coming from. And for universities, diversity in which courses students are studying. And what that means for me and you is when we're counselling students, really thinking about the whole breadth and depth of courses that they could study, and not just defaulting on the 3 or 4 that we've been sending students to for the last 10 years, because there's a real appetite to not only attract students from different countries and different cities, but also onto different courses. And there are a wide range of courses in the UK on the ApplyBoard platform. Go on to the next slide. Take a little whistle-stop tour around the world. I said that Nigeria sort of almost doubled. Growth across the rest of the Middle East has been reasonably stable, but in kind of West Africa has been the big story. And then some shifts in demand from Iran and other destinations too. Should we do the next slide? Of course, where the Middle East is fairly stable, Africa booming, the real driving force is out of the markets in Asia. And sort of overall, these markets grew by 40% in recent years, which accounts for the lion's share of students coming to the UK. Now, we all think about India where we think about South Asia, but actually Nepal grew at a rate of knots with 136% growth, and Sri Lanka almost on par with 28% growth. So massive growth in those smaller South Asian countries. Pakistan, a country that's very close to my heart, having worked there previously, also saw really big growth and took the spot as the UK's 4th largest student population from that market. And then we've seen other smaller markets on the fringes in Southeast Asia, still a little bit slow after the pandemic and struggling to recover. But we've seen more recently those markets start to rebound. And of course, across the platform, we see demand in Australia, the UK, Canada, Ireland, and the US. And Southeast Asia is gearing back up for Australia. And as a result, the UK is seeing a bit of an uplift there too. But the real success story, and you may have heard me talk about this before, has been the exponential growth in students from India. The curve speaks for itself. The number of students out of India is impacting all of our destinations, Canada, the US, but actually the UK took the prime spot for growth out of India. And as I said earlier, I think India, if it hasn't already, it's on the cusp of overtaking China in terms of the number of students coming here for their first year of study. Now, it's important to think that given that pace of growth, where those students are going, and one stark fact that we should all think about is that 1 in 3 international students are studying at the top 10 universities, which is a massive growth for those top 10 universities. Very exciting, but growing pains as well. And I know many of you will experience frustrations with slow offer turnaround times and some of the challenges associated with those growing pains. We're working really hard with our university partners to help them scale up. But what I would encourage you to do again is think about the almost 70 partners that we have on the platform and think beyond the top recruiting universities to the wide range of options, because you're more likely to secure a seat. And we're investing a lot in the technology to help inform those decisions. But when you're counselling students, it's just that keeping an open mind of the options that are in front of them. Next slide, please. That leads us neatly into kind of assessing some of the data, some of the trends, some of the threats and opportunities that presents to us. Kind of where ApplyBoard is. And, you know, we came into the UK 3 years ago. We're grown at a pace of knots. We're now, as I said, nearly 70 university partners, which is 55,000 programs on the platform. And with evidence that we can attract students from 140 different countries to the UK. And I mean, just look at that map. And remember the map I showed you before about growth in all destinations, the standout being Northern Ireland. ApplyBoard's coverage is from the north to the south, the east to the west, high-ranked, more open universities, premium fees, more affordable universities. Within that network, you have access to a full suite of programs and institutions. Next slide, please. And here's a list of them. As I said, we'll share this with you. You'll have seen these on the platform. We'd encourage you to let us know if there are any that we're not working with at the moment that you would particularly want us to work with. We're out on the road all the time bringing new universities onto the platform. And in fact, very soon we'll be aiming to get into triple digits in terms of the number of university ApplyBoard works with. And there's a real appetite from our universities in the UK to come on board to the platform. Next slide, please. So those of you that were paying attention will have seen that the UK grew, according to the latest government data, by 12%. With your support, we outpaced that market growth and grew by threefold. So, you know, I think that's testament to your support and a huge recognition, and thank you for that. Next slide. And how do we build on that success? Look, we've talked about that record demand, and I think what it indicates is we've gone from a buyer's market where the student call all the shots to a supplier's market where universities are overwhelmed with applications, and it means that they prioritize according to what they can get done with the path of least resistance. And this is important for you and us at ApplyBoard to really think about, because what I want to do is invite you on a journey of success leading to success. I think this is what the data that we've talked about really tells us. So by submitting quality applications with high conversion rates, we know that we win confidence with our university partners. And when we win confidence with our university partners and we can show that an ApplyBoard application through one of our recruitment partners has a better conversion rate than others, they will prioritize ApplyBoard applications. Where we can evidence that there are no breaches or no documents that are irregular or any causes of concern, they'll always have faith in ApplyBoard and our recruitment partners and prioritize our applications. That leads to them giving us a better turnaround time, and they prioritize your business. And when they prioritize your business, together we're able to give greater levels of student success. And of course, then it's a circle that goes round and round and round. And once you've got greater levels of student success, they all tell their friends, they come back, and you get more quality applications. We win more confidence with the partners. They give us more resource, and so the virtuous circle goes round. And I share that with you because that's always been the case, but it's really, really important now when universities are overwhelmed by the volume of international applications, because we can all play a role in really putting forward the students that we know are going to convert, that we know their documents are good, and that we know that their finances are in order. Next slide, please. Okay, that kind of takes us a bit of a whistle stop around the world and some of the data. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Yamini, who's going to invite you to share your opinion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for such wonderful information. I didn't have many of it. So I would now request everybody to kind of take out your phones. If you're on desktop, feel free to type in the link and join in for, just open your camera, how you can scan the QR code. Just open your camera and then the little yellowish thing would actually show up as a link. Click on that, you would actually be on this slide.
We'll give you a minute to get that QR code scanned.
I'm excited for everybody.
I'm excited. This is the best bit of the webinar.
Right? The fun part?
This is the fun part. Hearing from the real experts.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that everybody is saying that no active polls. It's because we are starting. We just want everybody to kind of come in first. Let us know while you're in, and then we can start. We have like over almost shy from like 500 people. So just want to make sure everybody kind of gets in before we actually start. You could also go in like slido.com and like type in the code as well. So that's easier if you're on desktop. Awesome. Should we give it more time or should we just begin the fun part?
I can't wait any longer. Let's dive into it.
Okay, awesome. So let's see. It says, how optimistic are you for the year ahead about the UK? Very optimistic, optimistic, slightly optimistic, and not optimistic at all. Awesome. So just gonna wait for some answers coming in. All right. Hope everybody got their answers in. Okay. Should we display the results?
Let's drum roll and see what's come up.
Woohoo! It says 43% are very optimistic. I see slightly optimistic kind of. Oh, do you see the poll kind of going in? That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, wow. It's increasing. We have 155, 58 people now. Oh, that's amazing. 160.
I think, you know, clearly we've got an audience where the glass is half full, and it's fantastic to see such positivity and optimism out there. I have to say, I had to be quiet because I share that optimism. I think there are so many really good reasons why students would choose the UK.
Right.
That's great to see.
I think a lot of people are also like putting in the chat as well. So looking at that as well, it seems like people are actually optimistic. So that's amazing. I see like more votes for optimistic in the chat. Should we move to the next?
Let's.
Okay. How do you think the growth in the UK compares to Canada and the US? What would you answer to this, Justin? I know you're biased, but
I think the accent gives it away, right? I think you know from the accent what my answer would be, but I don't want to influence the poll.
Yeah, right.
And this, of course, guys, is looking forward. What do we think the destinations will look like going forward?
Right. Should we see what our audience think?
Let's.
Oh, wow. Better got like 52%. The same got like 35%. We got some better in the chat and we got some worse in the chat. So I think it's good. It's good.
I think what I'd say is all destinations have their opportunities and challenges in the year ahead, and just that focus on quality and making sure that applications are going to convert. If we get that right, then we'll go into that circle of success leading to success.
Correct. Awesome. Go on to the next. Oh, we got 182 this one time. That's amazing. Thank you, people.
Yeah, huge thanks.
How much do you think policy changes in immigration will impact international education in the UK next year?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
So very much, not so much, the same, or not at all? See, 112 people, 117. I love it when people are kind of joining in. That's amazing. Hey, should we? Oh, I see very much on in the chat, a lot of very much. So I'm
No,
gonna
see if
go,
the chat is the same as the poll, but the chat looks pretty unanimous.
right? Oh, wow. 79, oh, 78% now thinks that it's very much. I'm gonna go with 79 just because I see people with chat. That's good. So it says not so much at 19, same, not at all. Okay. I'm glad
What
they're
what I would say on this is, at the moment, the government is not speaking with one voice, and you'll see lots of news coverage and lots of reporting, but actually, certainly the Department for Education really wants to keep optimistic and shares your view about the UK. And there'll be some headline grabbing policies for the fact that there's an election in a year's time, so the parties are playing politics a little bit. But things like the graduate route, the PSW, they're committed to in the international strategy. So we'd hope that puts us on a good course for the next year.
100%. That's amazing. All the best for the next of this session. I know that we are going to go in the fun part again. That's Q&A for everybody. So I'm going to invite Flavia and Justin to kind of take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Yuni. I have to say that was really, really both interesting and exciting to hear that feedback from you. And we'll use that data to share with our wider network. So your voice is really important as we think about our next steps. So thank you for that little exercise. Flavia, are you able to come on board?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Yamini. I've been on the back here looking at all the questions that we received. We've been absolutely inundated. So to start with, I just going to introduce myself. My name is Flavia. I work as Partner Relations Manager for the UK. I am based in London and I look after the relationship between ApplyBoard and all the universities that are based in London and in surroundings as well. So we have received a lot of questions, as I said. I've tried my best to answer some of them in the Q&A sections. Thank you for those who submitted the questions there. However, some of these questions were really, really interesting. Therefore, I thought just bringing some of them to everyone's attention so that we can all learn from these questions as well. So one of the questions that we got the most is the dependent visa still available? As Justin mentioned, from January 2024, international students in the UK will no longer be able to bring their dependents on their student visa unless they are studying for a postgraduate research program. So the UK sector right now is currently going through an exercise of identifying which programs are available for the dependent visa as well. So please wait for more updates in regards to the specific courses that your students are interested in. Also, very important recommendation is if you have students with specific cases, specific questions, specific immigration status, please suggest them to seek professional legal advisors. At ApplyBoard, as well as yourself, we want to try our best to help our students. However, it's really important that we advise properly, and therefore sometimes it's important that students seek professional legal advice. So this is our suggestions for you and your students. Another question is student visa, graduate visa to work skilled visa. Is this possible? Is the transition still possible? Yes, but it's important that students are sponsored also for the skilled visa. So when applying to switch from a graduate visa to a skilled worker visa, applicants will need to complete an online application form, pay the relevant fees. They also need to provide the documents such as the passports, any travel documents to establish and identify the nationality as well. And then it's essential that they also have a valid COS, COS, which is issued by an approved UK sponsor, which is usually a company that will sponsor the individual to stay and work for them. This can be done no more than 3 months before the date of their applications, and will give access to students to the work skilled visa. Another question that we received is in regards to the post-study work visa and whether it's still available. Absolutely, yes. We are really happy to confirm that's still available. It is called the graduate visa, and it gives students the permission to stay in the UK for at least 2 years after completing their course in the UK. Students must be in the UK when they apply for the graduate visa. And they will be allowed to stay for at least 2 years or 3 years in case they are studying for a PhD. We also had a couple of questions in regards to whether we're going to have similar webinars to other destinations, in particular to Canada. Yes, we've already submitted this as a request to a webinar team. There is going to be a similar webinar to this one today in regards to Canada. And anyways, keep an eye on your inbox and keep in touch with your ApplyBoard contact, as they will always update you on new webinars and new things to learn for you. So keep an eye on that. So definitely there's going to be new webinars for you to learn and update your skills as well.
Can I just, sorry, Flavia, can I just say something in response to that? Of course, great that you're interested in other destinations, but we all know the UK is the best destination there is to send international students. So I'd say that. But actually, on the serious note, the ABCC course, which you have access to, is invaluable, especially if you're coming to the UK as a new destination, or indeed any of our destinations. And UK and Irish perspective, we've worked very closely with the authorities to pull together some sector-leading training for you with the ApplyBoard Counsellor course. So the ABCC training, really encourage you to do that for the UK and Ireland. But you can also do that for all destinations.
Absolutely right, Justin. Thank you. We have received also a lot of questions in regards to specific countries, specific universities, such as a country. I had questions from in regards to Latin America, Uzbekistan, and so forth. I would strongly recommend that you ask those questions to your ApplyBoard representative in particular, as they will be able to provide specific answers for your region as well. And a lot of questions have arisen on whether the recordings of these webinars will be shared. Absolutely yes. After this webinar, I believe within 1 or 2 days, the recording of today's sessions will be shared with all the people that have registered to the webinar. So for the time being, but if there's more questions, I'll try to answer quickly in the chat.
Thanks so much, Flavia. I think that kind of wraps us up for time. There are more questions, and we'll, as I said, an open door. So do keep talking to us here at ApplyBoard. And of course, as Flavia said, we're aiming to do more of these webinars on themes that are of interest to you. Do please keep an eye on our blog that we publish with the Apply Insights team, which comes out very regularly, a couple of times a week, and gives you a real insight on some of the emerging opportunities and risks for each of our destinations. And look, you are the extended part of the ApplyBoard family, and really important that we hear from you on how ApplyBoard can best support you as we grow together. And I guess that kind of wraps us up. Look, thanks, Flavia, for helping address the questions. Yamini, thank you for running the poll. I will kind of particularly thank Yamini because she was up at 4 a.m. this morning. She's in our HQ in Canada. So she had probably the earliest start of all of us on the call. But I'll finish as I started and just extend a huge, huge thank you to each of you, our recruitment partners. You're the lifeblood of the ApplyBoard ecosystem, and it's a real privilege to present to you, and it's been great engaging with you. Do stay in touch. Thanks so much, everyone.